His lover mocked me, saying he's mine now. She had no idea I'd leave them with nothing overnight. The doorbell rang at exactly 9:47 p.m. I remember because I had just finished loading the dishwasher, my hands still damp from the warm water, when the sharp chime cut through our quiet suburban home. Ryan was working late, again, the third time this week, and I had been looking forward to a peaceful evening with my favorite novel and a glass of wine. I didn't expect anyone at this hour. Jessica, my best friend, always texted before dropping by, and our neighbors respected the unspoken rule about evening visits. Something about that doorbell made my stomach twist, a premonition I would later wish I had heeded. When I opened the door, she stood there like a warning sign I couldn't read in time. Young, probably mid-20s, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having your world truly shattered. Her dark hair cascaded over designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and her red lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Madison, right? Her voice dripped with artificial sweetness. I'm Vanessa. We need to talk. I should have slammed the door. Should have trusted that voice in my head screaming that nothing good could come from this conversation. Instead, I stepped aside and let her in, adhering to the politeness ingrained in me since childhood. The same politeness that had made me the perfect wife for the past decade. She walked into my living room like she owned it, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors Ryan and I had picked out together during our renovation 3 years ago. Each click felt like a countdown to something I couldn't yet comprehend. Nice place, she said, running her finger along the back of our leather couch. Ryan told me you decorated it yourself. The casual mention of my husband's name by this stranger sent ice through my veins. How do you know Ryan? Her laugh was sharp, deliberate. Oh, honey, I know a lot more than just his name. She pulled out her phone, swiped a few times, and held it up. See? The photo hit me like a physical blow. Ryan, my Ryan, kissing this woman in what looked like a hotel room, his wedding ring clearly visible on the hand cupping her face. He's mine now, Vanessa announced, pocketing her phone with a triumphant smirk. Has been for months, actually. I just thought you should know. It's the decent thing to do, right? The room started spinning, but I forced myself to stay upright. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of supporting his dreams, of being there through every failure and success, of building a life together, all destroyed in the span of a few seconds by this woman's calculated cruelty. Get out. My voice was barely a whisper. What was that? She leaned in, mock concern on her face. Get out. This time, the words came out stronger, fueled by a rage I didn't know I possessed. She shrugged, adjusting her designer purse on her shoulder. Sure thing. But you might want to ask Ryan about the Four Seasons when he gets home. Room 7-18. He always books the same one for us. She walked to the door, then turned back with that poisonous smile. Don't worry about calling him. He's already on his way here. I made sure to let him know about our little chat. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving me alone in a house that suddenly felt like a museum of lies. Photos of our wedding day mocked me from the walls. The anniversary cards he'd given me, displayed proudly on our mantel, now read like scripts from a play where I'd been the only one who didn't know it was all pretend. My phone buzzed, Ryan calling, no doubt in a panic. I let it ring as I walked to our bedroom, my movements mechanical. The bed we shared stared back at me, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. How many nights had he come home to me after being with her? How many lies had he whispered in the dark? The buzzing continued, persistent and desperate. I picked up the phone, saw the multiple missed calls and frantic text messages. Madison, please answer. It's not what you think. Let me explain. A strange calm settled over me then, replacing the initial shock with something colder, more focused. I opened our safe, where we kept all our important documents I'd insisted on organizing myself because Ryan could never be bothered with paperwork. Every property deed, every bank account, every investment we'd made together, all joint accounts, all requiring my signature for any major changes. I pulled out my laptop and started making calls, first to our lawyer, then to our bank. By the time I heard Ryan's key in the front door, I had already set things in motion that would change both our lives forever. He burst into the bedroom, face flushed, eyes wild. Madison, please! I held up my hand, silencing him. Save it. My voice was steady, surprising even me. I have just one question. Was it worth it? The fear in his eyes told me he had no idea what was coming. Good. Let him think this would be like every other wronged wife's story. Tears, screaming, begging for explanations. I had something very different in mind. Tomorrow, Ryan Thompson would learn exactly what happens when you betray the woman who knows all your secrets, handles all your paperwork, and has nothing left to lose. But tonight, I would let him sweat. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The bed felt like a crime scene, each pillow a reminder of broken trust. Instead, I sat in our home office, my office now, surrounded by financial documents and legal papers, my laptop casting a blue glow across the darkness. Every few minutes, my phone would light up with another desperate message from Ryan, who I'd locked out of the house after our brief confrontation. Please, let's talk about this. I made a mistake. Where am I supposed to go? I let each message fade to black, unanswered. The Ryan I knew, or thought I knew, had died the moment Vanessa showed me that photo. In his place was a stranger who'd spent months lying to my face, coming home with stories about late meetings while his cologne masked another woman's perfume. At 3 a.m., Jessica called. I hadn't told her anything yet, but best friends have a sixth sense about these things. I just had this feeling something was wrong, she said when I picked up. Are you okay? The concern in her voice nearly broke my carefully constructed dam of composure. Ryan's been having an affair. That son of a... She caught herself. I'm coming over. No, I said firmly. I need you to listen instead. I have a plan, but I need your clear head. As I outlined what I intended to do, Jessica's initial rage transformed into something like admiration. Madison, she said slowly, I had no idea you could be so ruthless, I supplied. I was going to say strategic, but yes, that too. I spent the rest of the night preparing. Years of managing our household finances meant I knew exactly where every dollar was, every password, every account number. Ryan had always joked that I was overly meticulous with paperwork. That's why I married you, he'd say with a grin. You keep me organized. Well, he was about to discover just how organized I could be. At 7 a.m. sharp, I called our lawyer, Michael Bennett. He'd handled all our legal matters for years, including the contracts for Ryan's business ventures. Madison, he answered, professional as always. What can I do for you? I need everything we discussed last night put into motion immediately. My voice was steady, certain, and I need it done before noon. There was a pause. Are you sure about this? Once we start, I'm sure. The image of Vanessa's smirk flashed through my mind. All of it. I spent the morning watching the pieces fall into place. One by one, our joint accounts were frozen. Access to business accounts restricted. The locks on our house changed. Each action felt like dismantling the life we'd built together, but also like building something new, my independence. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Vanessa, having a lovely lunch with Ryan at Le Cirque. Hope you don't mind. I allowed myself a small smile. Perfect timing. I waited exactly 20 minutes, enough time for them to order, perhaps even receive their first course, before making the final call to authorize the complete freeze on Ryan's personal credit cards. Then I sat back, imagining the scene that would unfold. It didn't take long. At 12:47 p.m., my phone exploded with calls and messages. First from Ryan. What the hell did you do? My cards aren't working. This is childish, Madison. Then from Vanessa, her smug tone notably absent. You spiteful bitch. I took a sip of my coffee, now cold from sitting untouched all morning, and typed out a single response to Ryan. Seems like your new girlfriend will need to cover lunch. Hope she's as invested in your future as I was. Then I blocked both their numbers. Jessica called again. How are you holding up? I'm fine, I said, surprising myself by meaning it. But I could use some help. Want to come over and help me pack up his things? On my way, she said without hesitation. Want me to bring trash bags or donation boxes? Both. I looked around at the photos on the walls, the shared memories that now felt tainted. And wine. Definitely bring wine. As I waited for Jessica, I walked through the house, our house, seeing it with new eyes. Each room held memories. The kitchen where we'd cook Sunday brunches, the living room where we'd binge-watch shows on lazy weekends, the office where we'd plan our future. But instead of breaking down, I felt something unexpected. Relief. For months, maybe years, I'd been living with an undercurrent of unease, ignoring the late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the growing distance. Now, at least, I knew the truth. And knowledge, combined with preparation, was power. My phone pinged with an email from Michael. All the paperwork was filed. Ryan's access to our assets was officially restricted, pending divorce proceedings. The house was secured in my name, thanks to some careful planning during our last refinancing, something Ryan had been too busy to review before signing. I clicked through the documents, each page a reminder of the years I'd spent being the responsible one, while Ryan chased his dreams, and apparently other women. Those same traits he'd taken for granted, my attention to detail, my financial acumen, my planning, were now the weapons he'd never seen coming. The doorbell rang. Jessica, arriving with reinforcements of wine and packing supplies. As I went to let her in, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the broken, betrayed wife I'd expected to see. Instead, I saw someone stronger, someone who refused to be a victim. Let Ryan and Vanessa have their romance. I had something better, a future entirely my own, and the satisfaction of knowing that karma sometimes works through carefully executed legal documents. "Ready?" Jessica asked as I opened the door, boxes under one arm and wine under the other. I nodded, feeling truly ready for the first time in years. "Let's rewrite this story." Jessica left around midnight, leaving behind a house transformed. All traces of Ryan had been methodically sorted into 3 piles: donate, store, and trash. His expensive suits, which he'd always treated like badges of success, now hung in garment bags by the door, ready for donation. Photos had been taken down, leaving ghost rectangles on the walls. Even his precious collection of vintage wines, bought more for show than appreciation, had been carefully boxed up and moved to the garage. In the sudden quiet, the magnitude of what I'd done hit me like a physical wave. I sank onto the couch, now stripped of the throw pillows he'd picked out, and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The tears came without warning, hot and angry, then sad, then something else entirely. Tears of relief, of freedom, of grief for a life I'd thought was real. My phone lit up with an email notification. Ryan had finally figured out how to reach me after I'd blocked his numbers. The subject line read, "You've made your point." I opened it, more out of morbid curiosity than anything else. "Madison, what you did today was completely unnecessary. You've embarrassed us both. Vanessa had to pay for lunch in front of everyone at Le Cirque. Is that what you wanted? To humiliate me? I'm staying at the Marriott on my corporate card, the only one you couldn't freeze. We need to talk about this like adults. You're angry, I get it, but destroying everything we've built isn't the answer. Ryan." I laughed, a hollow, brittle sound in the empty house. He still didn't get it. Even now, he was more concerned about being embarrassed at an expensive restaurant than acknowledging the depth of his betrayal. The "os" in his email might as well have been from a stranger. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I considered my response. In the end, I kept it simple. "Ryan, I suggest you check with your corporate office about that hotel card. As for talking like adults, you lost that privilege somewhere between working late and room 718. Madison." I hit send, then forwarded the entire exchange to Michael. Within minutes, my lawyer replied, "Corporate has been notified of the situation. The Marriott card should be deactivated by morning. Would you like me to prepare a formal cease and desist regarding any further direct contact?" "Yes," I typed back. "And Michael, thank you." I spent the rest of the night wandering through the house, mapping out changes I wanted to make. The master bedroom needed repainting. I'd always hated the greige color Ryan had insisted on. The home office could become my yoga studio. Each planned change felt like reclaiming territory, like marking the space as my own. Around dawn, my doorbell rang. Through the security camera Jessica had insisted we install yesterday, I saw Ryan, disheveled, wearing yesterday's clothes. The sight of him, once so familiar, now felt like looking at a photograph of a stranger who happened to share my husband's face. "Madison," his voice was hoarse. "I know you're in there. The Marriott kicked me out. My cards are all dead. Where am I supposed to go?" I watched him through the camera, remembering all the times he'd come home late, all the business trips that ran unexpectedly long, all the signs I'd ignored because I'd trusted him completely. Part of me wanted to open the door, to hear his explanation, to give him the chance he was begging for. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed 911. "Yes, there's an unauthorized person attempting to enter my home. He's my soon-to-be ex-husband, and he's been formally notified not to come to this address. Yes, I'll hold." Ryan must have heard me through the door because his eyes widened. "You wouldn't." "I already did." I said through the door, my voice steady. "You have about 4 minutes to leave before they arrive. I suggest you use them wisely." He stood there for a moment longer, and I saw something shift in his expression. The first real understanding that this wasn't a game, that his actions had consequences he couldn't charm or negotiate his way out of. "This isn't over," he said, but he was already backing away from the door. "It was over the moment you chose her," I replied, though I don't know if he heard me. I watched him walk away, shoulders slumped, no longer the confident man who'd taken my love for granted. The police arrived just as he turned the corner, and I gave them a statement to keep on file. Better safe than sorry, as Jessica would say. Later that morning, I received another email, this time from Vanessa. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Taking everything away from him? He loves me. We're going to be together no matter what you do. You're just proving why he needed someone younger, someone who isn't so vindictive and controlling. You can keep the house and the money. We don't need it." I archived it without responding. Let her learn the hard way what it means to build a relationship on quicksand. Ryan's pattern was clear now. He'd probably been doing this for years, getting by on charm and promises. But charm doesn't pay bills, and promises don't keep you warm at night. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Breakfast. I know a place where we definitely won't run into any unwanted faces. Give me 30 minutes, I replied. I showered and dressed, choosing clothes I'd bought for myself, rather than the conservative styles Ryan preferred. The woman in the mirror looked tired but determined. Her eyes held shadows, but also a spark that had been missing for too long. As I grabbed my keys, a new set, like everything else in my life now, I paused in the doorway. The house felt different in the morning light. Emptier, yes, but also full of possibility, like a blank canvas waiting for new memories to be painted. I'd spent 10 years being Ryan Thompson's wife. Now it was time to remember who Madison Carter had been all along, and more importantly, who she could become. The country club's parking lot felt like enemy territory. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, watching familiar faces drift past. These were people I'd spent countless Sunday brunches with, attended charity galas alongside, shared polite conversations about nothing important. Now they all knew, or thought they knew, what had happened to my marriage. "You don't have to do this," Jessica said from the passenger seat. She'd insisted on coming with me to cancel my membership, arguing that no one should face the gossip mill alone. Actually, I do. I checked my lipstick in the rearview mirror. Perfect. Like the armor it was. If I don't show up, they'll say I'm hiding in shame, that I'm the bitter wife who couldn't keep her husband interested. Who cares what they say? I do. I straightened my shoulders. Because whatever story gets told here is the one that sticks. And I'm done letting other people write my narrative. The lobby was exactly as I remembered. All marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Sandra Wheeler, self-appointed queen of the social circuit, held court near the front desk. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, like a shark scenting blood in the water. "Madison, darling," her voice carried across the lobby, ensuring everyone would turn to watch. "We've all been so worried about you. Such a shame about Ryan. Men can be so foolish at that age. Midlife crisis, you know." I met her gaze steadily. "Actually, Sandra, I'd say it was less of a crisis and more of a cautionary tale about the dangers of poor investment strategies." Jessica barely contained her snort of laughter. Sandra's smile flickered. "Well, yes, we heard about the financial situation. Such a nasty business. But surely you'll reconsider. Ryan's family has been members here for generations. That's exactly why I'm here." I pulled out an envelope containing my formal resignation letter. To tie up loose ends. The membership was in Ryan's name, after all. And since he's currently unable to cover the dues, I let the implication hang in the air. A small crowd had gathered, pretending not to listen. I could practically see the text messages flying across the club's social network. Good. Let them talk. "But what about the charity gala next month?" Sandra pressed. "You're on the planning committee. I'm sure you'll manage without me, though you might want to review the budget. I handled all the financial arrangements." I smiled sweetly. "I'd hate for there to be any embarrassing surprises with the vendors." Sandra's face went pale. She'd been taking credit for my organizational skills for years. Now she'd have to actually do the work herself. As Jessica and I walked out, heads turned to follow us. I held my chin high, feeling their stares like pinpricks on my skin. In the car, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. "That," Jessica declared, "was magnificent." Did you see Sandra's face when you mentioned the gala budget? Small victories. I started the car, but it feels good to stop pretending. My phone buzzed. An email from Michael. Ryan was contesting the asset freeze, claiming he needed access to the business accounts to pay his employees. Nice try, I muttered, forwarding the email to our accountant. We'd already arranged to have the payroll handled directly, ensuring the employees wouldn't suffer for their boss's indiscretions. Lunch? Jessica suggested. I know a new place downtown, far from the country club crowd. Actually, I hesitated. I have a job interview. Jessica's eyes widened. Since when? Since I realized I spent 10 years managing Ryan's life instead of building my own. I turned onto the highway, away from the manicured lawns and judgmental stares. Remember how I used to do freelance event planning before we got married? You were good at it. I was great at it, until Ryan convinced me to focus on supporting his career instead. The words tasted bitter now. Anyway, there's a boutique hotel downtown looking for an events director. My interviews with the owner, Madison Carter, returning to the workforce. Jessica grinned. I love it. The hotel was nothing like the country club. Modern, artistic, with none of the stuffy pretension. The owner, Diana Chen, met me in the lobby. She was about my age, with a sharp suit and sharper eyes. Impressive resume, she said, after we sat down. Though there's a significant gap. I spent those years managing multiple properties, coordinating high-profile events, and overseeing complex financial portfolios. I met her gaze. The fact that I did it for my husband's business rather than a salary doesn't make the experience less valid. Diana's eyebrows rose slightly. No, it doesn't. And I assume you're looking for a change due to the recent situations I've heard about. News traveled fast in certain circles. I'm looking for a change because I excel at what I do, and it's time I did it for myself. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled. We have 3 major events coming up this month. The previous director left us in quite a mess. How soon can you start? Tomorrow, I said without hesitation. Walking out with a job offer in hand felt like another piece of myself sliding back into place. My phone buzzed again. Ryan calling from yet another new number. I declined it without breaking stride. In the parking lot, I ran into someone I didn't expect. Vanessa. She was getting out of her car, a significantly less expensive model than the one she'd driven to my house that first night. Oh, she said, faltering slightly. I didn't know I'd be here, I finished for her. Funny how small this city can be. I noticed her outfit, designer, but last season, the shine of her newfound relationship was already showing wear. I have a lunch meeting, she said defensively. Of course you do. I walked past her to my car, then paused. Oh, and Vanessa, the hotel's event calendar is now my responsibility. You might want to find a different venue for any future meetings. Her face flushed, but I was already walking away. Let her wonder how much I knew about their regular rendezvous at upscale hotels, all charged to corporate accounts I now controlled. Jessica was waiting at our favorite coffee shop when I arrived. Well, I got the job. I sank into the chair across from her, and I ran into Vanessa. Drama? Actually, no. I accepted the latte she pushed toward me. Looking at her now, all I feel is pity. She thought she was winning some great prize, but all she got was a man who throws away decade-long commitments for a few months of flattery. And she got him broke, Jessica added with a smirk. That, too. I took a sip of coffee, enjoying its bitter warmth. You know what's strange? I feel more like myself today than I have in years. That's not strange at all. Jessica reached across the table and squeezed my hand. So that's freedom. My first morning at the Edison Hotel started with organized chaos. Diana had understated the mess left by the previous events director. The upcoming charity gala was in shambles. The summer wedding season was double booked, and the hotel's signature jazz nights had lost their headline performer. Perfect. Nothing made me feel more alive than a challenge. The Anderson wedding and the Chen anniversary party are scheduled for the same ballroom, my new assistant, Marcus, explained as he walked me through the calendar. He was young, efficient, and clearly overwhelmed. Both parties have signed contracts. I studied the documents, noting details others might miss. The Anderson contract was signed by the previous director after the Chen booking. That's our leverage point. I pulled out my phone. Give me an hour. 3 calls and 1 creative negotiation later. I had the Anderson wedding moved to our rooftop garden, with a sunset ceremony thrown in as a special bonus for their flexibility. They were thrilled with the upgrade, and I had my first win of the day. That was impressive, Marcus said, relief evident in his voice. Never underestimate the power of making someone feel like they're getting the better end of the deal. I paused, remembering how often Ryan had used that same strategy in his business dealings. The thought didn't sting as much as it would have a week ago. By lunchtime, I had reorganized the entire events calendar, salvaged the Jazz Night series with a promising new quartet, and started preliminary planning for the charity gala. The work felt familiar, like slipping on a favorite dress you'd forgotten you owned. Madison. Diana appeared in my office doorway. A word. She closed the door behind her, and my stomach tightened. Had I overstepped? Moved too fast? The chairman of the board just called, she said, sitting down. Apparently, you've caused quite a stir this morning. I can explain. He's delighted. A smile broke across her face. The Anderson family has been clients for years, and they're usually difficult to please. But Mrs. Anderson just called him personally to rave about their new rooftop wedding plans. I felt tension leave my shoulders. So I'm not fired. Quite the opposite. I wanted to invite you to dinner tonight. The board is hosting a small gathering at La Maison, and I'd like to introduce you to some key players. La Maison. The same restaurant where Ryan had proposed 10 years ago. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. I'd love to, I said, pushing away the memory. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. I was deep in budget spreadsheets when Marcus knocked on my door. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. He says he's your husband. My fingers stilled on the keyboard. Ex-husband, I corrected. And he knows he's not supposed to contact me. Should I call security? I considered it. No, I'll handle this. Ryan stood in the hotel lobby, looking expensive but tired. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by something more desperate. Nice office, he said as I approached. Moving up in the world already. What do you want, Ryan? The corporate board meeting is tomorrow. I need access to the quarterly reports. Those reports are with the accountants, where they belong. I kept my voice level, aware of the eyes watching us. You should have thought about that before you spent company money on hotel rooms with your girlfriend. His face darkened. You're trying to destroy me. No, Ryan. You did that yourself. I glanced at my watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. Madison, please. He grabbed my arm as I turned away. Vanessa left, said she didn't sign up for this drama. I made a mistake. We can fix this. For a moment, I saw him as he used to be, the man who could charm a room, who made me feel like the center of his world. Then I remembered Vanessa's smirk, the photo on her phone, the years of lies. Security, I called out, not taking my eyes off him. Please escort Mr. Thompson out and update his photo in the restricted access file. 2 guards appeared almost instantly. Ryan released my arm, his expression hardening. You've changed, he said as they approached. No, I straightened my blazer. I've just stopped pretending to be someone I'm not. Back in my office, I found an email from Michael. The corporate board had reviewed the evidence of Ryan's misuse of company funds. They were calling an emergency vote on his position. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Retail therapy after work. You need something killer for your dinner tonight. I smiled, typing back. Meet me at Nordstrom in an hour. Shopping with Jessica had always been an exercise in confidence building. She had an eye for pieces that pushed me out of my comfort zone, in the best way possible. Try this, she said, holding up a deep blue dress that would have given Ryan's conservative mother a heart attack. It was bold, elegant, and utterly unlike anything in my married wardrobe. In the dressing room, I studied my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked strong, capable, maybe even a little dangerous. She looked like someone who could walk into a room full of board members and hold her own. Someone who didn't need a man's name to open doors. Well, Jessica called from outside. I opened the door. Her wide grin told me everything. Ryan's going to hate it, she said with satisfaction. Ryan's opinion doesn't matter anymore. I turned back to the mirror, admiring how the dress moved. But you're right. He'll absolutely hate it. At La Maison, I walked in with my head high, ignoring the whispers that followed me. Diana introduced me to the board members as the miracle worker who saved the Anderson wedding. I spoke about my plans for modernizing the hotel's events program, about incorporating local artists and sustainable practices. They listened, really listened, in a way Ryan's business associates never had. Later, as I drove home, I thought about Ryan's words. You've changed. Maybe he was right, but not in the way he meant. I hadn't become someone new. I'd simply stopped being the person he'd wanted me to be. My phone lit up with another text from an unknown number. Vanessa again. He keeps calling me. What did you do to him? I deleted it without responding. Let her deal with the consequences of her choices, just as I was dealing with mine. The difference was, I was finally choosing myself. The house was quiet when I got home, but it no longer felt empty. Instead, it felt like a space full of possibilities. I kicked off my heels, poured a glass of wine, from my own collection, not Ryan's pretentious vintages, and stepped out onto the balcony. The city lights sparkled below, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt truly, completely free. The news broke at 9:47 a.m., exactly 1 week since Vanessa had appeared at my door. Ryan Thompson, rising star of Thompson Global Solutions, had been voted out by the board of directors. The company's press release was diplomatic, but clear, following a comprehensive review of financial irregularities. I was in the middle of a meeting with Diana when my phone started buzzing incessantly. First came the news alerts, then the text messages, old friends, business associates, even Ryan's mother. I silenced them all, focusing instead on Diana's proposed renovations for the ballroom. Your phone's having a seizure, Diana noted, raising an eyebrow. It's nothing important. I pulled up the budget spreadsheet. Now, about the lighting design. Madison, Diana closed her laptop. When were you going to tell me that the man being crucified in today's business section is your husband? Ex-husband, I corrected automatically. And it wasn't relevant to our work here. She studied me for a long moment. The charity gala next month. Half the guest list is from his company's board. Former company, I said. And yes, I know. I've already drafted 3 alternate guest lists and revised the seating arrangements. I handed her a folder. I also have contingency plans for sponsors who might want to distance themselves from the situation. Diana flipped through the papers, her expression shifting from concern to admiration. You really do think of everything, don't you? I had a lot of practice. The words came out more bitter than I intended. My phone buzzed again. A text from Jessica. Turn on the news. Now. Diana was already reaching for the remote that controlled the office's wall-mounted TV. The business channel filled the screen, where a familiar face was holding an impromptu press conference outside the corporate headquarters. Vanessa. She stood at the microphones in a conservative suit that must have cost a month's salary, playing the role of the whistleblower. As Mr. Thompson's executive assistant, I felt morally obligated to bring these financial discrepancies to the board's attention. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound started small, then built until tears streamed down my face. I'm sorry, I gasped, seeing Diana's concerned expression. It's just, she was never his assistant. She was a junior accountant he met at a conference 3 months ago. She didn't discover anything. She just took the evidence I gave to the board and I gestured at the screen, where Vanessa was doing her best impression of a concerned corporate citizen. Hell hath no fury, Diana murmured, like a mistress who realizes her meal ticket is about to bounce. I wiped my eyes, professional mask sliding back into place. Excuse me, I should handle some calls. In my office, I found 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Most were from Ryan, growing increasingly desperate. What did you tell them? This is all your fault. I'll lose everything. Please call me. The last one made me pause. I never meant to hurt you. 5 words. 5 simple words that could have meant something a week ago. Now, they just felt hollow, like everything else about our marriage. Michael called next. I assume you've seen the news? Hard to miss. Ryan's lawyer reached out. They want to negotiate. Now they want to negotiate. I looked out my office window at the city below. After he tried to force his way back into the house. After he showed up at my workplace. After he spent the last week trying to paint me as the vindictive ex. He's desperate, Michael said simply. The board's decision changes everything. No income, no prospects. Most firms won't touch him after this kind of scandal. He's facing a complete professional meltdown. That sounds like a him problem. Madison, Michael's voice softened. You've won. Completely. The question is, what do you want to do with that victory? I thought about it. What did I want? A week ago, I wanted revenge. Now, I want to move on, I realized. Send me the proposal, but make it clear, I'm not interested in reconciliation. This is purely business. After hanging up, I walked down to the hotel's bar. It was too early for a drink, but I needed a moment to think. The bartender, an older woman named Rose, took one look at my face and started making coffee. Rough morning? She asked, sliding a cup across the bar. You could say that. I glanced at the TV above the bar, where they were replaying Vanessa's performance. Ever have one of those days where your past and present collide? Honey, at my age, those are the only kind of days we get. She followed my gaze to the screen. That her? I nodded. Not very convincing, is she? Rose snorted. Trying too hard. You can always tell when someone's playing a part they haven't earned. Voice of experience. Let's just say I've seen enough corporate scandals play out in this bar to write a book. She topped off my coffee. The ones who make the biggest show usually have the most to hide. As if on cue, my phone lit up with another news alert. Someone had leaked Vanessa's employment records, revealing her actual position and tenure at the company. Her credibility as a whistleblower was evaporating faster than morning dew. I hadn't leaked those records. I didn't need to. The truth had its own way of coming out. Another coffee? Rose offered. No, thank you. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I have work to do. Back in my office, I found an email from Diana. The board had reviewed my contingency plans for the gala and approved them all. They were also interested in my proposal for a new winter event series. I began typing a response, but my fingers paused over the keyboard. Through my office window, I could see the city stretching out before me, the same view I'd had from Ryan's corporate office when I'd helped him build his dream. Only now, I was building my own. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. I hope you're happy with yourself. You've ruined everything. Vanessa again. Her press conference gambit had failed. Her dreams of corporate martyrdom shattered. She was learning what I'd known all along. That facades crack, that lies catch up, that the truth demands its due. I typed back a single response. Actually, I am happy, and that's the difference between us. Then I blocked her number, turned back to my computer, and got to work. There was a gala to plan after all, and this time, I was doing it my way. But you should come out with us tonight, Marcus said, leaning against my office doorway. A bunch of us are trying that new tapas place downtown. No pressure, but, he shrugged. You might actually have fun. I looked up from the event proposals spread across my desk. In the month since I'd started at the Edison, Marcus had evolved from an overwhelmed assistant to something closer to a friend. He'd started making these casual invitations about 2 weeks ago, clearly worried that I spent too many evenings buried in work. I actually have plans tonight, I said, surprising us both. Really? He raised an eyebrow. Hot date? Hardly. I laughed, but it came out slightly nervous. Jessica signed us up for a painting class. Something about embracing new experiences. What I didn't tell him was that it was actually a divorce therapy art class, as Jessica had dubbed it. The studio provided wine, canvas, and the company of other women rebuilding their lives one brushstroke at a time. Well, that's different, Marcus grinned. Never pictured you as the artistic type. I'm not. I gestured at the perfectly organized spreadsheets on my computer. Numbers are more my comfort zone. Maybe that's exactly why you need it. He had a point. Lately, Jessica had been gently pushing me to step outside the careful boundaries I'd built around my new life. The job was going well. Better than well, actually. The charity gala had been a triumph. Even with half the guest list reworked at the last minute, Diana had given me full creative control over the winter event series. I was excelling at everything I could measure, quantify, control. But at night, in the quiet of my too large house, something still felt missing. Madison? Diana's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She stood in the doorway behind Marcus, who quickly made himself scarce. Do you have a minute? Of course. I started gathering the proposals, but she waved them away. This isn't about work. I wanted to invite you to dinner. My wife and I are hosting a small gathering at our place this Saturday. Very casual, just friends and good food. I hesitated. Outside of Jessica, I hadn't done much socializing since everything with Ryan. The thought of making small talk with strangers made my stomach tighten. Diana must have read something in my expression. No business talk allowed. And no one from your old social circle, I promise. Just interesting people who know nothing about corporate scandals or revenge served cold. The last part made me smile. I'll think about it. Do that. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and that reminds me. There's someone from the Robertson Gallery here to see you, about their upcoming exhibition opening. My pulse quickened slightly. I'd spoken with James Robertson on the phone several times about hosting their contemporary art showcase, but we hadn't met in person. His voice had been warm, intelligent, and decidedly intriguing. Send him in. James Robertson was not what I expected. Tall, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. He looked more like a literature professor than an art gallery owner. He also, I noticed immediately, wasn't wearing a wedding ring. Ms. Carter, he extended his hand. Thank you for seeing me without an appointment. Madison, please. His handshake was firm but gentle. And it's no problem. I've been looking forward to discussing your ideas for the showcase. We spent the next hour talking about art, space utilization, and the intersection of classical and modern aesthetics. I found myself relaxing into the conversation, enjoying the way his eyes lit up when he described a particularly striking piece. We should continue this discussion over coffee, he said as our meeting wound down. If you're interested, of course. The invitation hung in the air between us. Professional but not entirely. Casual but purposeful. For a moment, panic fluttered in my chest. The instinctive reaction of a woman who'd been someone's wife for so long. She'd forgotten how to be anything else. I'd like that, I heard myself say. After he left, I sat at my desk, trying to process the swirl of emotions his invitation had stirred up. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer. Final divorce papers ready for signing. Thursday at 2 p.m. Reality crashed back in. Was I ready for coffee with an attractive man? For Diana's dinner party? For painting classes and tapas nights and all the messy, unstructured parts of a life I was still learning to live? My office phone rang. The front desk. Mrs. Thompson is here to see you. I closed my eyes. Ryan's mother. Of course. Send her up. Eleanor Thompson had always been a force of nature in tailored suits and pearls. She swept into my office like she owned it, taking in the space with critical eyes. So, this is where you've landed. Her tone suggested I'd fallen rather than flown. Hello, Eleanor. What can I do for you? You can stop this vindictive campaign against my son. She placed a manila envelope on my desk. This is a revised settlement offer. Much more generous than you deserve, considering your behavior. I didn't touch the envelope. I assume Ryan sent you? He's devastated, Madison. His whole life. Everything he worked for. Everything we worked for. I corrected quietly. Or did you forget who managed his schedule, planned his networking events, smoothed things over with difficult clients, and now you're using all of that against him? She shook her head. I thought we raised you better than this. The words hit harder than I expected. For 10 years, I'd tried to be the daughter Eleanor never had, measuring myself against her impossible standards. You didn't raise me at all. I stood up, my voice steady. And that's the problem, isn't it? You molded me into what you thought Ryan needed, and I let you. But that version of me doesn't exist anymore. Clearly. She looked around my office again, but this time I saw something different in her eyes. Not disdain, fear that her carefully constructed world was crumbling, just like mine had. I have a meeting to prepare for, I said, softening slightly, and I already have the final papers from my lawyer. But thank you for coming by. She left without another word, taking her envelope with her. I watched her go, feeling strangely light. My phone buzzed again. Jessica reminding me about painting class. I texted back, on my way. But first, what does one wear to paint badly in public? Something that makes you feel brave, she replied. I looked at my reflection in the office window. The woman staring back wasn't Ryan's wife, or Eleanor's project, or even the calculating strategist who'd orchestrated a corporate takedown. She was just Madison, messy, uncertain, but finally, genuinely herself. I grabbed my keys, texted Diana a quick, "Count me in for Saturday," and headed out to make some beautiful mistakes on canvas. After all, isn't that what new beginnings are for? Thursday arrived with the weight of inevitability. I stood in front of my closet, staring at my options for what one wears to end a marriage. The navy blazer I'd worn to sign our marriage license 10 years ago caught my eye, a neat symmetry that felt too pointed, too intentional. Instead, I chose a simple white sheath dress. New beginnings deserved fresh choices. You don't have to do this alone, Jessica said over the phone as I did my makeup. And I can reschedule my client meeting. I do, actually. I studied my reflection, making sure my hands didn't shake as I applied mascara. Some things you have to face on your own. The law office lobby felt smaller than I remembered. Ryan was already there, sitting stiffly in one of the leather chairs. He looked older somehow, the past month having carved new lines around his eyes. His suit was still expensive, but it hung differently on his frame, like he'd lost weight or purpose or both. Madison. He stood as I approached, uncertainty flickering across his face. A month ago, He would have known whether to kiss my cheek or shake my hand. Now we were strangers sharing a history we remembered differently. Ryan. I sat in the chair farthest from him, smoothing my dress with steady hands. Michael appeared before the silence could stretch too thin. "Man, shall we begin?" The conference room was all mahogany and morning light. I signed where indicated, my new signature already feeling more natural than the mine, Madison Thompson, I'd practiced so carefully after our wedding. Each page turned felt like stepping through a door, closing it gently behind me. Ryan's pen hesitated over the final page. "Do you ever think about—" "No," I said softly but firmly, "and neither should you." He signed. Walking out of the building, I felt lighter, as if I'd set down a heavy bag I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. My phone buzzed. A text from James. "Still on for coffee today?" I smiled, typing back. Wouldn't miss it. The cafe he'd chosen was nothing like the pretentious spots Ryan had favored. It was small, artsy, with local artwork on the walls and mismatched vintage furniture. James was already there, reading a well-worn paperback. "I Kurt Vonnegut?" I asked, recognizing the cover as I approached. He looked up, smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. Guilty, though I should probably pretend it's something more sophisticated, given my profession. I like honest better than sophisticated. I sat down, noticing he'd waited to order. Another small difference from Ryan, who would have already selected what he thought I should drink. Honest is good. He closed his book. Speaking of which, how are you? Really? I just signed my divorce papers an hour ago. His expression shifted to concern. We can reschedule if you need. Actually, this is exactly what I need. I surprised myself by meaning it. A conversation that isn't about the past. Understanding flickered in his eyes. In that case, tell me about your future. What does Madison Carter want? The question caught me off guard. For so long, my wants had been filtered through the lens of being Ryan's wife, Eleanor's daughter-in-law, the perfect corporate spouse. I'm still figuring that out, I admitted. That's the best part, isn't it? He leaned forward slightly. The figuring out. We talked for 2 hours, about everything and nothing. Art and books, travel dreams and childhood memories, the way cities change at night. He told me about his divorce 5 years ago, not with bitterness, but with the clarity of someone who'd done their own figuring out. Would you like to have dinner with me? He asked as we finally prepared to leave. Not coffee, not a business meeting, an actual date. My heart skipped. I'd like that. That evening, I arrived at Diana's house for the dinner party, feeling strangely energized. The day that had started with endings had somehow opened into possibilities. Diana's wife, May, greeted me with warmth and a glass of wine. Their home was a beautiful blend of modern art and cozy comfort, filled with interesting people who, true to Diana's word, knew nothing about corporate scandals or revenge served cold. Madison! Diana waved me over to a group discussion about urban renewal projects. Perfect timing. We need your expertise on event spaces in the historical district. The conversation flowed easily, touching on architecture, community engagement, the arts. I found myself talking about ideas I'd had for the Edison's Winter series, about combining local history with contemporary culture. You should talk to James Robertson about that, someone suggested. His gallery does amazing community outreach. I hid my smile in my wine glass, thinking of our coffee date. I'll keep that in mind. Later, as guests began to leave, Diana found me on their terrace, enjoying the night air. You seem different tonight, she observed. Lighter. I signed my divorce papers this morning. Ah, she leaned against the railing beside me. And how does freedom feel? I thought about it. Like standing at the edge of something big. A little scary, but exciting. The best things usually are. She studied me for a moment. You know, when I first hired you, I worried you might be running from something. Now I see you were running toward yourself. My phone buzzed. A text from James. Thank you for coffee, and for saying yes to dinner. Saturday? Speaking of running toward things, Diana said, catching my smile. Good news? Just possibilities. Driving home, I took the long way, enjoying the city lights. My house was quiet when I arrived, but it no longer felt empty. I kicked off my heels and walked through the rooms, seeing not what was missing but what could be. The painting from my divorce therapy class hung proudly in the living room. Abstract, imperfect, completely my own. Next to it, a blank wall waited for new memories to fill it. My phone buzzed one last time. Jessica. How are you holding up? I sent her a photo of me toasting my terrible artwork with a glass of wine. I'm good, I typed. Really good. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, it wasn't something I had to convince myself was true. You're overthinking this, Jessica said, sprawled across my bed, while I tried on what felt like the 100th outfit. It's dinner, not a military operation. I haven't been on a first date in 12 years. I held up 2 dresses. The last time I did this, people still used Facebook. The black one, she said decisively. And you're not that same person anymore. That's a good thing. She was right. The Madison who'd gone on her first date with Ryan had been young, eager to please, desperate to fit into his world. This Madison, the one staring back from the mirror in a perfectly fitted black dress, knew exactly who she was. My phone buzzed with a message from Diana. Emergency at the hotel. Need you ASAP. No, Jessica said, reading over my shoulder. Absolutely not. You're not canceling this date. I have to at least check. Marcus can handle it. That's why you hired him as your assistant manager. She took my phone and typed out a response. Madison is unavailable. Contact Marcus. He has full authority. That's a bit direct. That's the point. She handed my phone back. You're allowed to have a life outside work. The restaurant James had chosen was intimate without being pretentious. A converted brownstone with art from local artists on the walls. He waited outside, looking handsome in a charcoal suit that spoke of quiet confidence rather than Ryan's carefully cultivated power looks. You look beautiful, he said, and the simple sincerity in his voice made me blush. Inside, the conversation flowed as easily as it had over coffee, but with an added layer of possibility that made my skin tingle. We talked about art and music, about his gallery's upcoming projects, and my ideas for the Edison's winter series. You're different when you talk about work, he observed, studying me over his wine glass. Your whole face lights up. Is that a good thing? It's a wonderful thing. He leaned forward slightly. Passion is attractive, so is knowing what you want. And what if I'm still figuring that out? Then the journey is even more interesting. His hand found mine across the table. I'd like to be part of that journey, if you'll let me. The warmth of his touch sent electricity through my veins, a feeling I'd almost forgotten existed. My phone buzzed again. Diana. Real emergency. Pipe burst in the ballroom, flooding. I'm so sorry, I said, showing James the message. I have to. Go, he finished, already signaling for the check. I'll drive you. The scene at the Edison was chaos. Water cascaded down the grand staircase, and the ballroom, set up for tomorrow's charity auction, was a disaster. Marcus had already called emergency services and was directing staff with surprising authority. Thank God you're here, he said, then stopped short at my outfit. Oh no, the date. I'm so sorry. Don't be. I kicked off my heels, hiking up my dress to wade through the mess. What's the damage? To my surprise, James rolled up his sleeves and joined in, helping move artwork and furniture to safety. He worked alongside the staff without complaint, his expensive suit getting as soaked as everyone else's clothes. Hours later, with the water finally contained and a cleanup crew hard at work, I found him talking art restoration with our head of maintenance. I know some excellent conservators, he was saying, for the damaged pieces in the collection. I'd be happy to make some calls. I watched him, something warm unfurling in my chest. Ryan would have been on the phone with his lawyer, looking for someone to sue. James was looking for ways to help. I believe I owe you a rain check, I said as we finally left the hotel, both of us damp and disheveled. Actually, he smiled, I think this was perfect. Perfect? We spent our first date dealing with a flood. We spent it seeing each other in action. No pretense, no performance. He tucked a wet strand of hair behind my ear. Just us, being exactly who we are. Then he kissed me, right there on the sidewalk, tasting of coffee and possibility. I melted into it, feeling years of tension dissolve in the simple rightness of the moment. A car horn blared, making us jump apart like teenagers. Across the street, I caught a glimpse of a familiar face, Vanessa, staring with undisguised shock before hurrying away. Someone you know? James asked. Someone I used to know. I watched her disappear around the corner, feeling nothing but a distant pity. It doesn't matter anymore. Back home, I found an email from Diana. You're getting a bonus for tonight. Also, James Robertson. Well played. I smiled, peeling off my ruined dress. On my bed lay the outfit Jessica had originally vetoed. Comfortable pants and a soft sweater. Perfect for a nightcap on my balcony, remembering the feel of James's kiss. My phone lit up with a text from him. Despite the flood, or maybe because of it, this was the best first date I've had in years. Breakfast tomorrow. I thought about Ryan, about all the business breakfasts where I'd sat quietly while he networked, about Vanessa's face when she saw me kissing James, about how none of it mattered anymore. Breakfast sounds perfect, I typed back. I know a place with great coffee and questionable art on the walls. My kind of place, he responded, and my kind of woman. I stood on my balcony, watching the city lights twinkle. Somewhere out there, Ryan was probably in his corporate apartment. Vanessa was processing what she'd seen, and Eleanor was lamenting her son's fall from grace. But here, in this moment, I was exactly where I wanted to be. My phone buzzed one last time. Jessica. Well, how was it? I sent her a photo of my ruined dress with the caption, "Disaster. Perfection. I'll tell you everything tomorrow." Then I curled up with a glass of wine, looking forward to breakfast, to work, to all the beautiful disasters and perfect moments yet to come. For the first time in my life, I wasn't following someone else's script. I was writing my own story, one imperfect, authentic page at a time. The Winter Festival proposal lay open on my desk, covered in Diana's enthusiastic notes. Brilliant, she'd written across the top. Start implementing immediately. My vision for transforming the Edison into the city's premier cultural destination was becoming reality, piece by piece. The board approved the full budget, Marcus announced, practically bouncing into my office. Every last penny. I allowed myself a moment of pure satisfaction. This wasn't just a professional win. It was validation of everything I'd been fighting for. The festival would combine local artists, musicians, and artisans in a month-long celebration, turning the Edison's public spaces into a wonderland of creativity and culture. My phone lit up with a text from James. Heard the good news. Celebration dinner tonight? Can't, I typed back. Promise Jessica a girls' night. Tomorrow. It's a date. Proud of you, by the way. 3 simple words that made my heart flutter. 2 months into dating James, I was still getting used to this, having someone celebrate my successes without trying to overshadow them. Madison. Diana appeared in my doorway. Got a minute? She closed the door behind her, taking a seat. The Winter Festival pitch was exceptional, but that's not why I'm here. She placed a magazine on my desk, one of those glossy business publications that Ryan used to collect. Page 32. I opened it, then froze. There, under Women to Watch in Business, was my name. The article detailed my transformation of the Edison's events program, the upcoming Winter Festival, and my innovative approach to combining culture and commerce. They want to do a full profile, Diana said. A cover story for next month's issue. My first instinct was to decline. Ryan had always been the public face of our success, while I worked behind the scenes, but I wasn't that person anymore. I'll do it, I said, surprising myself with my certainty. Good, Diana smiled, because I already told them yes. That evening, over wine and takeout, I showed the article to Jessica. Look at you, she said proudly. A Madison Carter, business mogul. Hardly, but I couldn't help smiling. Speaking of Carter, she said carefully, have you thought about what you'll do when James proposes? I choked on my wine. What? Oh, come on. He's completely in love with you. And don't think I haven't noticed how you light up every time he texts. It's only been 2 months. 2 months of basically living in each other's pockets. He keeps a toothbrush here. Madison. She had a point. James and I had fallen into an easy rhythm that felt both exciting and comfortable. He'd become a fixture at the Edison, bringing in artists for the festival, joining me for late-night planning sessions that turned into impromptu dinner dates. I'd practically moved into his gallery's office on weekends, working on my laptop while he curated shows. I'm not ready, I said quietly. Not yet. Because of Ryan. Because of me. I played with my wine glass, trying to find the right words. I lost myself in my marriage, became this perfect corporate wife who existed to support someone else's dreams. With James, I'm finally figuring out who I am on my own terms. And who is that? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A news alert about Ryan, his first public appearance since the scandal. He was at some tech conference, reinventing himself as a business transformation consultant. Jessica peered at the article. Well, that's rich. Actually, it's perfect. I put my phone away. He's exactly who he's always been, selling an image, but I don't have to buy it anymore. Later that night, after Jessica left, I found myself on my balcony, thinking about her question, who was I now? My phone lit up with a text from James. Can't sleep. Thinking about you. I smiled, typing back, come over. 20 minutes later, he arrived with late-night breakfast supplies. I figured if we're both awake, we might as well make the most of it. I watched him move around my kitchen, so at ease in my space. He'd never tried to redecorate like Ryan had, never suggested I change anything to suit his tastes. Instead, he'd simply folded himself into my life, adding to it without trying to reshape it. What? He asked, catching me staring. I love you, I said, the words falling from my lips before I could second-guess them. He set down the pancake batter, crossing the kitchen in 2 strides. I love you too. He cupped my face in his hands. I've been wanting to say it for weeks, but I didn't want to rush you. I'm not her anymore, I whispered. The woman who needs to be rushed or pushed or molded. Good. He kissed me softly. And because I fell in love with exactly who you are. The pancakes got slightly burnt, but it didn't matter. We ate them on the balcony, talking about the winter festival, about his upcoming show, about everything and nothing. At some point, I realized I was planning future events without fear, thinking about next year without anxiety. Move in with me, I said suddenly. James looked surprised. Are you sure? What happened to taking things slow? I'm sure about you. About us. I took his hand. But I'm not giving up my career or my independence. I'm not becoming anyone's wife right now. I just want to share my life with you. His smile was like sunrise. I would never ask you to be anything but exactly who you are. My phone buzzed. Diana sending late-night ideas for the festival. James read the message over my shoulder, already offering suggestions, completely comfortable with my work being as important as his. And suddenly, Jessica's earlier question had an answer. Who was I now? I was Madison Carter, successful event director, soon-to-be magazine cover subject, woman in love on her own terms. I was someone who could burn pancakes at midnight and close million-dollar deals at noon, someone who could love deeply without losing herself. I was, finally, exactly who I wanted to be. Ms. Carter, could you tell us about your vision for the Edison's transformation? The reporter from Business Weekly sat across from me in my office. Recorder running, photographer circling for the perfect shot. 3 months ago, this kind of attention would have terrified me. Now I leaned into it, comfortable in my own skin and certain of my words. The Edison isn't just a hotel, I explained, gesturing to the mood boards for the winter festival that covered my walls. It's a canvas for cultural expression, a space where art, music, and community intersect. The winter festival is about creating experiences that resonate beyond the ordinary, and this vision comes from your own journey of transformation. She glanced at her notes. Your recent divorce from Ryan Thompson made headlines. My work stands on its own merit, I interrupted smoothly. The festival represents the Edison's future, not anyone's past. The photographer caught my eye, giving an approving nod. He'd been shooting for an hour, capturing me in various poses around the hotel. Unlike the stiff corporate photos Ryan had always insisted on, these felt natural, dynamic, me in motion, doing what I loved. After they left, I found James waiting in my office, a knowing smile on his face. You heard? I asked. Every word. He pulled me into a kiss. You were magnificent, though I might be biased. Living together for the past month had been surprisingly easy. James understood my late nights at work, often joining me with takeout and creative input. His art books now mingled with my business texts, and his coffee mug had found a permanent home next to mine. The magazine wants to shoot some photos at the gallery tomorrow, I said, settling back at my desk. Something about capturing the synergy between business and art. Speaking of the gallery, he perched on the edge of my desk, something he did when he was excited about an idea. What would you think about hosting the festival's opening night there instead of here? I looked up, intrigued. The Edison has the space, but the gallery has the perfect atmosphere for what you're trying to create. Industrial charm, raw energy, plus it makes a statement about breaking traditional boundaries. He was right. The gallery's converted warehouse space would add exactly the edge I'd been looking for. Diana would need to approve. Already did. His grin widened. I ran it by her this morning. She loves the idea. A knock at my door interrupted us. Marcus stood there, tablet in hand, looking anxious. You need to see this. He pulled up a local news website. There, splashed across the screen, was a photo of Ryan at some startup conference. Vanessa conspicuously at his side. The headline read, Thompson's comeback. Controversial CEO launches new venture. They're calling it disrupting the hospitality industry, Marcus said. Apparently, they're planning to compete directly with traditional hotels like the Edison. I skimmed the article, noting the familiar buzzwords and grandiose promises. Ryan smiled from the photo with his trademark confidence, but something was off, a desperation in his eyes that I recognized from our final days together. Madison, James touched my shoulder. You okay? Perfectly. I closed the browser. Our festival will speak for itself. The next week passed in a blur of preparations. The gallery transformation took shape, with local artists installing pieces that seemed to grow from the very walls. Musicians rehearsed in tucked-away corners, their melodies weaving through the space. James and I worked side by side, our different perspectives creating something greater than either of us could have imagined alone. The night before the opening, I stood in the gallery's main space, surrounded by the controlled chaos of final preparations. Light installations cast ever-changing patterns across the walls, and the scent of fresh flowers mixed with paint and possibility. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ryan, heard about your festival. Bold move, but risky. Sure you know what you're doing? I showed the message to James, who read it with raised eyebrows. He's worried, James said simply. He should be. I typed out a response. Enjoy your startup, Ryan. I'm exactly where I need to be. Then I blocked the number, just like all the others. Diana arrived for a final walkthrough, her critical eye taking in every detail. This is more than I imagined, she admitted. The magazine was right about you, Madison. You're not just running events, you're creating experiences. Later that night, James and I sat on our balcony. It had become our balcony now, his telescope sharing space with my wine collection. The city sparkled below, full of promise. Nervous about tomorrow? He asked. Not nervous. I considered the feeling in my chest. Excited. Ready. He took my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. I've been thinking about the gallery's spring season. There's this emerging artist from Seattle. Her work would pair perfectly with that conference series you're planning. Already planning that far ahead? With you, always. He kissed my knuckles. Well, unless that scares you. I thought about Ryan's text, about all the times he'd questioned my capabilities while pretending to support them, about how different it felt to have someone who saw my strength instead of trying to control it. Not scared, I said. Just grateful. For this. For you. For everything that led me here. The city hummed around us, a melody of possibility. Tomorrow, the festival would open to critical eyes and public judgment. My face would be in magazines, my vision scrutinized, my past perhaps whispered about in corners. But tonight, I was simply Madison, a woman who had lost herself and found something better, a woman who could love freely because she finally loved herself first. My phone lit up with a message from Jessica. Ready for your big debut. I looked around at my life, the career I'd built, the man who loved me as I was, the future spreading out bright and uncertain and perfectly mine. More than ready, I typed back. This is just the beginning. The gallery hummed with anticipation. In exactly 1 hour, the winter festival would open to the public. But for now, I stood alone in the transformed space, taking it all in. Light installations created rivers of color across the walls. Local artists, work seemed to breathe with life, and the subtle scent of winter flowers filled the air. Everything was perfect, down to the last detail. There you are. James appeared behind me, sliding his arms around my waist. The press is already lining up outside. Let them wait. I leaned back against him, savoring the moment. I want to remember this exactly as it is. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. You need to see this. Attached was a link to a breaking news story. Ryan's startup had imploded spectacularly. Investors pulling out after discovering inconsistencies in his business plan. The final blow. Vanessa had gone to the board with evidence of mismanaged funds, playing whistleblower one last time. History repeats itself, James observed, reading over my shoulder. No, I said, putting my phone away. History teaches us. What we learn is up to us. The great doors opened at exactly 7, and the festival came alive. Critics, journalists, and socialites mixed with local artists and musicians. Diana worked the room like the seasoned hotelier she was, while May captured candid moments with her camera. Madison, Jessica appeared, resplendent in a gown that made her look like she belonged in a gallery herself. This is incredible. Even Sandra Wheeler is impressed. And you know how she lives to criticize. I followed her gaze to where Sandra stood, actually smiling as she examined an ice sculpture that doubled as an interactive art piece. Eleanor Thompson stood nearby, her usual criticism notably absent as she took in the transformed space. "Mrs. Thompson," I greeted her politely as I passed. She caught my arm. "Madison, She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "You've done well for yourself." Coming from Eleanor, it was practically a benediction. The magazine photographer captured the moment. Madison Carter, rising star, graciously accepting praise from her former mother-in-law. But I was already moving on, drawn to where James was introducing a young artist to potential buyers. "And here's the visionary herself," he said proudly as I approached. "Madison, meet Sophie Chen. Her work is exactly what we were discussing for the spring series." I studied the artist's bold, vibrant pieces. These would be perfect for the atrium installation we're planning. "Really?" Sophie's eyes widened. "I mean, the Edison it's prestigious. So is your talent." I gestured to where her current piece commanded attention from the crowd. "Trust your vision." I did. The evening flowed like the champagne. Elegant, effervescent, alive with possibility. Local news crews captured the spectacle while social media buzzed with images tagged Chas Edison Winterfest. Marcus orchestrated the logistics flawlessly, having grown into his role just as I had grown into mine. Around midnight, as the crowd thinned and the evening's magic settled into satisfaction, I found myself back in the quiet corner where I'd started. The festival would run for a month, bringing art and music and life to the winter days. But this moment, this perfect, crystalline moment, was mine to keep. "Penny for your thoughts?" James joined me, offering a glass of champagne. "Just thinking about time," I said. "1 year ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was and what my life would be. And then you became who you were always meant to be." A commotion near the entrance drew our attention. Ryan stood there, looking uncertain and out of place. Our eyes met across the space, and for a moment, I saw him as he truly was. Not the powerful CEO or the unfaithful husband, but simply a man who had lost his way. He nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement or perhaps surrender, then turned and left. It felt like the closing of a book, the final period in a story I no longer needed to read. "Dance with me," James asked, pulling me close as the jazz quartet played their last set. We swayed together in the artist-crafted light, surrounded by the beauty we'd helped create. Different kinds of beauty. His artistic vision, my organizational skills, our shared belief in possibilities. "I've been thinking," he said softly. "The gallery's New York location needs a director." My heart skipped. "James, before you say anything, it's not an either-or choice. The Edison's festival program could expand to multiple cities. Diana's already talking about it." I looked around at what we'd built together. Not just the festival, but a life that honored both our dreams. "Are you asking me to move to New York?" "I'm asking you to build something bigger. With me." He touched my face gently. "No pressure, no rush, just possibilities." My phone buzzed one last time. The first reviews were in. "Edison Winter, Festival Redefines Cultural Space," read the headline. "Carter's vision transforms city's art scene." But I didn't need to read them. I knew exactly what we'd created here, and more importantly, what I'd created in myself. Possibilities. I agreed, kissing him softly. I like the sound of that. Later, as we walked through the quiet gallery, turning off lights and saying goodnight to our transformed space, I caught my reflection in one of the art installations. The woman looking back at me wasn't Ryan's ex-wife or the woman who'd gotten revenge. She was simply Madison. Strong, creative, loved for exactly who she was. 1 year ago, a woman had shown up at my door with a cruel smile and a determination to destroy my life. She'd succeeded, in a way. She'd destroyed the life I thought I wanted, the person I thought I had to be, and in the ruins, I'd built something better. "Ready to go home?" James asked, holding out his hand. I took it, feeling the warmth of his fingers intertwine with mine. "Actually," I said, "I think I finally am home." Above us, the winter stars shone through the gallery's skylights, witnesses to endings and beginnings, to revenge and redemption, to the beautiful art of becoming yourself. And somewhere in the city, a woman was just discovering her husband's betrayal, just beginning her own journey of transformation. I hoped she would find her strength, her voice, her truth. But that was another story, for another time. This one, my story, was just beginning. The end. Thanks for watching to the end. What did you think of this story? Let us know in the comments below. We value your opinion. Click the like button if you enjoyed it and be sure to subscribe to receive more captivating stories. Activate the bell so that you're always the first to know when a new video is published. See you next time.